My name is Sharon Danks. I'm with Green Schoolyards America. I am thrilled to move on to the second part of our session, and inviting Mary Filardo to join us today. We're honored to have her here. Mary's Executive Director of the 21st Century School Fund, and she's a leading national authority on school facilities planning, finance, management, and policy. She's going to share a presentation with us today to help us better understand the three major federal funding packages that passed recently to provide COVID relief. And she'll talk about the unprecedented opportunities they offer school districts to make investments in facilities for outdoor learning. And we think that this federal funding has the potential to help school districts create outdoor facilities that meet the current needs to reduce virus transmission during the pandemic and address learning loss and improve mental health. But they also have the potential to help schools create permanent outdoor improvements that'll support curriculum instruction and health for the years to come. I'd like to give you a little bit more background about Mary as well. Mary Filardo founded the 21st Century School Fund in 1994 to provide the District of Columbia and other urban communities with leadership, innovative financing solutions, research, and public policy analysis of school facility issues. She's helped plan innovative projects in Washington, D.C., has written extensively on public school facility issues, and has developed software to support long-range facilities master planning. In 1994, she advocated for and then led the first citywide educational facilities planning process in Washington, D.C., and nearly 30 years, leading to the preliminary educational facilities plan in 1995, which laid the foundation for regular educational facilities master planning for DC, and more than $2 billion spent to improve and build DC public schools and public charter school facilities. In 2001, Mary founded the Building Educational Success Together Collaborative, a learning community of urban education reform organizations dedicated to building the public will and capacity to improve urban school facilities so they support high quality education and community health. She's also the founder and chairperson of the Rebuild America School Infrastructure Coalition, called the BASIC Coalition, which formed in 2016. The BASIC Coalition is a nonpartisan coalition of citizen, public sector, labor, and industry associations who support federal funding to help underserved schools and districts modernize and build K-12 public school facilities. Mary received a BA in philosophy and math from St. John's College and a master in public policy and finance from University of Maryland. And we are grateful that Mary has been a collaborator this year with the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative, and she's helped to build our understanding of federal policy landscape and guide our policy working group. We're really honored to welcome Mary today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Sharon. It makes me feel really old, and that introduction. And actually, some of my most honored things, which is that I'm a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 6. Or I thought maybe the MA was like for Ma, but we're omitted. But I really appreciate being here, and I have just been so impressed by the work that the Schoolyards America has been doing, and I think this work to get kids, outside and engaged educationally as well as environmentally and recreationally, every which way is just so critical. So let me not take more time and sort of jump into, I'm, as she said, Executive Director of the 21st Century School Fund. I'm in Washington, D.C. My heart and roots are in my neighborhoods and my neighborhood schools, but I have been, drawn into this federal world, I suppose, because of proximity, and also because we think it's really important that we get, in the interest of equity, that there be a federal role in funding school infrastructure. And we're probably closer now than we ever have been, although I can't say that. I suppose I can see light, but I don't think I'm at the end of the tunnel on this one. But what we were able to do is get facilities finally named in some of the COVID relief bills. Now, what I have here is the description. The first one was CARES. People will remember, in March 2020, and there was about $13.5 billion that was for K-12 education, but facilities were not named as an allowable use. And because of the prohibitions in so many education pieces of legislation on using education dollars for facilities, there was a real reluctance to use it for anything except, perhaps cleaning materials and some PPE. We were able to get, really working with the Basic Coalition, facilities named specifically in the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. And that was just signed December 28th, and there was like 60 days to get it out. So basically, school districts are only just getting funds for facilities-related improvements at any level that they could really count on. And then finally, again, in the American Rescue Plan, they use the same language as in the second relief plan, which also did identify facilities as an allowable use. So what you see is a total of about 170 billion that has to go to LEAs, including Puerto Rico and the outlying areas, I think, in this number. And of that, there's a 20% set aside of this 122 billion, so 24 billion, that has to be used for learning loss. And it's very clear to me that even though I think we could consider some of the outdoor improvements for learning loss, that's not the way the learning loss community is looking at it. And quite honestly, there's enough money in other areas, I think, for us to look at for facilities. One of the things that I think is really important to keep in mind is that the disparities that we're seeing are extremely real in terms of reluctance of families to return, and that these poor facility conditions inside and outside, they're not just poor on the inside and so the kids can go outside. You've got, kind of duck fields and many playgrounds if they're not already just paved over, so that you've got really poor conditions on the outside as well in many, many school buildings. So because of the importance in ARP, and frankly, this administration to address disparate impacts, the National Council, which I've been working with at the state level, wants to make sure that the school districts are prepared to use ARP and other COVID relief funds to address a wide range of deferred maintenance and repairs in buildings and grounds. And just to give you an idea, this is Baltimore City, but the red is schools in their inventory. Now, this is in 2015, but I can tell you it's not that different. It is that those are the schools in poor condition. These are the schools in fair condition. So there's a lot of anxiety and concern about getting back to school in our urban communities that have been disinvested in. So what I'd love to sort of have you all look at too is what we're recommending for essentially how to use these dollars. And one of the things that we did is we looked at it, and we looked at district by district what the here, and anybody can get to this if you go to facilitiescouncil.org. We're going to look at Alaska because it's here, but you can look at any state and any LEA. And this is essentially the 90% of the 122 billion, the 90% of the 54.3 billion. This is the learning loss set aside. If you add this plus this minus this, this is the total COVID relief funds to LEAs, which is local education agencies, which is school districts, right? We're suggesting that at least 15% be an allocation for healthy and safe school facilities. And one of the things that we put in there for folks to get a frame of reference is how much the school districts reported that they had spent on operations and maintenance of plant, which is custodial, groundskeeping, it's repairs, maintenance, all operating budget items in FY18. So you can see that the Gateway School District in Alaska, they had spent almost $2 million on operations and maintenance of plant. And if they used 15% of their COVID dollars towards that, it would be essentially a 25% increase. Now, what you'll notice is that, and this is where I have to admit, I'm not as familiar with Alaska's distribution, but let's look at Anchorage. Anchorage, because what you're going to see is a higher poverty district got more money. And so, this is almost a 50% increase for Anchorage. So you're going to see a lot of variability in
Mary, can I pause you real quick? Mary, I think
Yes.
you're wanting to show us another screen that you're referencing, but we're not seeing it.
I'm sorry.
Would you mind finding that one to share?
Is it a new share? No, not at all.
You have to unshare the one that you have and reshare the new screen.
Oh, I'm sorry, because I am in the. Can you see now this?
Totally.
This tableau. I'm terribly sorry. Thank you for that. So this is just a tableau that we put together. It is on our National Council website, and this is the data that I'm referring to. So you can look up your state, your districts, and see how much their COVID relief funds are by district, what we think a 15% allocation for healthy and safe facilities would look like, and how that compares to your maintenance and operation of plant for FY18, which is the latest years that we have. So now you can see that, and it's at facilitiescouncil.org on the COVID-19 general guidance page. So anyway, this is the link that you can get to see that. So what we think is going to be really important is, even though there's now this allowable use and there is this substantial amount of money that could be used for facilities, we think it's actually not going to be that easy to get it allocated for school facilities, and in a way that makes it really usable, which is identify it early, and let the facilities folks know that they can plan and spend it for the priorities in their district and in particular schools. So, obviously the first priority is going to be implementing the CDC mitigation, guidance. Everyone's going to be looking at that, right? But the overall health and safety is just going to be really important, and we're going to have to make sure that some of these basic issues are able to be taken care of on the buildings and on the grounds. So Sharon, you have to forgive me for not putting one of, I have them in horrible schoolyards, but these were my buildings. I think I took these from the GAO report as well. And this is right here, you'll see is the text from ARP and from the other COVID. So repairs and improvements to enable operation of schools to reduce virus transmission. So, it's specific, but generalized. And so part of what we're seeing is there's a little bit of confusion on the part of districts on how exactly they can use it. And so they're anxious about it. So one of the things that we did is we have a set of recommendations about what we suggest should be facilities priorities, the assessment of condition, the plans for the routine and deferred maintenance on your buildings, a schedule for assignments or contracts to do some of this deferred maintenance and repair, some actual repair and upgrade, right, of systems and fixtures, and then modifying buildings and grounds to support physical distancing, including creating outdoor classrooms and outdoor eating areas and other spaces, and then making limited capital improvements to address emergency system or component failures, as well as to support learning loss programming and mental health. And, as an example, grounds improvements, we absolutely agree, are a part of kind of the recovery, not only for using buildings and grounds better, but also for mental health. There's just no question that, when you go to a school that feels like a prison and feels like an abandoned place, that you don't also still feel kind of abandoned. So we're recommending that school districts have flexibility to make their plans and engage their communities in these priorities. So for example, the learning loss, while they're, I know, focused on it, a programmatic side, we know that improvements to the grounds as well as to the buildings will actually do a tremendous amount, ensure that we can actually make up for learning loss, and clearly air conditioning, but also even shade in playgrounds and outdoor areas is really going to be critical to that. I'm going to stop. I want to, these slides will be available to you. And this was partly, 15% seems like kind of a modest amount of funding to seek, but I thought it was important for folks to understand that there's a lot of competition for this on the education side from a programming perspective. And they are, and I know the other part in here is that I left in here is there's a maintenance of equity provision in these bills, which is a new sort of concept even in education federal funding, but I think it's going to be very important. And so to the extent that a district and community can show that it is advancing the equity in its districts is going to be really important. So there's a lot of words in here, but I think that you will see that there's a lot of opportunity also, but I don't think it's going to fall easily on to the facility side, in part because the longstanding tendency for facilities folks not to advocate, essentially out of deference to, what happens on the curriculum side. But I think that, groups really need to help the facilities departments advocate to make these kinds of improvements. And again, at the end, these last few slides are the, all of the many, many permissible uses. And here are the ones specifically on repairs and improvements, inspection, testing, maintenance, repair on particularly ventilation. And then we thought that strategy Q, which is in the legislation, was broad enough that you could put just about anything under it that we're trying to do on the facility side. So let me stop there and just encourage folks that I think this is an incredible opportunity, but it will not be without effort to get these improvements. But the resources are there if the plans and the funding can kind of align together.
Thank you so much.
Let me stop there and be happy to have comments or questions.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Mary. I'm really, it's such complicated things to understand, and it's great to have your advice on working our way through it. And on the slide you were just showing before, can you again point out, so for this group that's particularly interested in outdoor learning, can you help to recommend where, I think it was, I remember from another meeting, is it in the O and Q sections here that we could be helping districts to find a place in this overall allocation where they could hang the outdoor infrastructure work?
Yes, because what you have here is, enable the, here we're talking about reducing risk of virus transmission, right? So in operating schools with low risk of virus transmission, it's been very clear in the science that being outdoors is low risk for virus transmission. So that's going to be a really important, O is going to be critical in that sense. And frankly, even though it does other things to, support student health needs, I actually think that from an advocacy case on a district level, that the reduce of virus transmission is going to be important. I mean, part of what I love about spending money on outdoor learning is that it is also one of those improvements that should stay forever and will have just enormous benefit and impact going forward. So unlike, some of the air filtration systems, room level air filtration systems where you're trying to compensate for an inadequate mechanical system, that's not going to stay. They're going to get rid of them, and eventually they should get a modern mechanical system. So I think that the outdoor investments are there's a great case to be made for them. I think in P, I have to say, part of what for folks that are very familiar with schools, the door repair and replacement, getting from inside to outside, managing those connections, like from an early childhood classroom to outside, maybe being able to convert a window into a door, into an outdoor area or making the doors, I mean, door hardware and door opening and closing is actually a really big deal, both in terms of security and in terms of, little kids being able to manage the weight of the doors and whatever. So even thinking about, oh yes, we should be able to do some door repair and replacement in order to make it more integrated, our indoor and our outdoor. It could be, overhangs over doors so that, as kids are, kind of again, moving from indoors to outdoors, I think there's some interesting things that could be done on the door side.
Yeah, that's super helpful to think those things through, Mary. And this has just been incredibly helpful. There's a lot of great questions. I'm gonna give you a couple of the questions that we can hopefully get some response to. So one is just kind of like basic. We'll start with just the basic. What is the definition of healthy and safe facilities?
Well, that's a great question, and fortunate for us, it's not entirely defined, right? So to some extent, when you are taking proposals, that will be contextual. I mean, certainly, not being exposed to environmental hazards, whether it's lead in the water, lead in the paint, asbestos in the tiles, asbestos in the plaster ceilings. I mean, all of those things, mold, those are pretty well defined. But there are other definitions of a healthy and safe school, that can be acoustical, it can be the lighting, and certainly the fresh air is a part of this. So it's a very, there's a lot of elements to what makes a healthy environment. And this is why we think, supporting student health needs is, actually very, very broad. I'm not sure that that's how they were thinking about it, was quite as broad, but it is.
But sometimes you got to just work with it, right? If they left it ambiguous,
exactly.
You jump in.
Right.
Okay, here's another question for you, Mary. This is like logistical. How do schools actually apply or access these funds? Do they have to apply for them? Do they just get a big check? And then what's the timeline or deadline once to use the funds?
Right. So these are funds that have been distributed by formula first to states, and then that states have to distribute to school districts, including charters that have, I think, certain LEA provisions associated with them. And but I'm talking about the public school funds, but they should be appearing like any day if they're not there already in school districts. So the district has them. So they're not going to schools directly. It will be your school districts, your boards of education that will be deciding how they're going to set their budgets. And I know, for example, in the District of Columbia, because we're still involved in the advocacy here, that the mayor and the council delayed their budget. They didn't decide yet where all the money is going to go because they weren't sure if they had it. And so in that sense, that might be happening in some other districts, but you need to pay attention to your school board and find out really when and where their, what their plans are for their budget.
Okay, so these are separate from other funding programs that like you have to apply for then.
Yes, the district has them. Whether or not how they're going to allocate them is really uncertain, and that's why I keep talking about the advocacy associated with this, because people are going to have to help the facilities department get the funds that are needed for facilities. And that's the buildings and the grounds.
Okay, great. And is there?
And I know there was a time frame. So in the law, it says that they have to be spent by September 22nd for the $54.3 billion that went nationally, or 22nd, 2022 or 2023. But in fact, they have a whole year beyond that. So it would be 2023 or 2024 for the American Rescue Plan funding. And one of the complications that the states and the districts are kind of running into is, oh, you have to spend this. You might have to keep the dollars separate because of these deadlines. But it isn't just 1 year. And this is why it's important for the facilities folks to get a sense of what money they have, because if you can plan it and procure it and implement it, over 3 years, you can do a better job, frankly, than if you're trying to do it by this September, for example.
Great. Awesome. And I think we have time for maybe one more of these questions. So I'll ask another one here. How do we, you've kind of alluded to some of these things, but just want to clarify, how do we make sure that the funding doesn't just get all used for HVAC systems? Like, are there other things besides HVAC or that type of thing that would compete with the funding for school grounds to reduce virus transmission? Like, can they use this on cleaning and other things? Or is it like just competing with HVAC?
No, I mean, it's competing with, this is why I left the big long list. It's competing with everything, right? It's not just competing with HVAC. What gets spent on school grounds is competing with mental health. It's competing with school nurses. It's competing with everything, which is partly why we were trying to say, do an allowance for school facilities that your facilities people know is for facilities, and then have the facilities within that community, at least you know what you're fighting over, right? But the reality is, if your district is wanting to go project by project, that you can, and particularly if you have a well thought out plan, there's nothing that says you can't do more than the 15%, right? And it might be that for some districts that's the appropriate thing to do, is to do more. So but those are things that each community, frankly, is going to have to wrestle with. And in part, it's going to be a function of the condition of the buildings and grounds to start with.
It might also be that they could be using their mental health funds to reduce stress by creating green space too, right, Mary?
Right.
You could be,
right.
depending
Exactly.
on how the advocates frame it for your district.
Right.
There are different ways to use the grounds too.
Right. Even it could be used for training educators on how you do outdoor education. And I mean, those are going to be important things if they're going to be, not just sort of putting them outside, but if actually they can take advantage of the fact that they're outside to change their methods and even to enhance their curriculum.
Okay, great. And then one last question from like a community-based partner. Is it, if they're working for like a nonprofit, like a school garden nonprofit or something like that, are they eligible to get any of this funding, or do they just need to be advocating with the districts to be using the funding in this way?
So the district can absolutely, and this is part of what we're hearing, is the districts are really anxious about hiring permanent folks, new staff with these funds. They are actually really seeking out NGOs and other non-school entities to implement some of the programming that they need, because they're afraid when the money's gone that they won't be able to stay hiring. So I think that while the money doesn't go sort of automatically to them, the districts are definitely looking to contract with nonprofits to deliver programming and supports. That's definitely true.
Awesome. Great. Well, this was like incredibly useful and helpful. Sharon, you want to take over?
I just wanted to thank Mary for coming today and for sharing your knowledge with us and answering our questions. We really greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
I also wanted to add that Mary has helped us in the past to put up information about the first two relief acts are on our website. And I'll add that link in the chat, and we will, I hope, be able to share some information also about the more, you said your slide deck. We'll find a way to put the slide deck in a place you can find it on the website in the policy section. So we can have more information there as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think we have a little bit of time left for doing breakouts. Great. So everyone, a big round of applause for Mary. Thank you. Thank you.